letter was from an assistant director of the FBI who was not too happy with that second to last song we heard, and NWA's hit single, Fuck the Police. Now, NWA was among many groups in the late 80s who were rebelling against a coercive, oppressive authority. And as you may be able to infer from the lyrics of the second to last song, the authority that they were rebelling and reacting to was the police. Take it back 10 years. In the late 70s, there was a movement emerging in both America and in England that was punk rock. And punk rock was a rebellion and a reaction to all types of authority. And that last track we heard was the Sex Pistols, one of the greatest, most well-known punk rock bands ever. And what exactly was the central oppressive authority that the Sex Pistols were raging against back then? Well, it was the Queen of England and her, quote, fascist regime. And in fact, the Pistols faced the same kind of political pressure and censorship that NWA did. The Pistols were banned from English radio. Take it back a little bit further. The 1960s hippie counterculture revolution rebellion was a reaction to the straight-laced post-World War II, no fun, short hair, warmongering culture of post-World War II America. So the hippie movement emerged in the 60s as a reaction to that. So what did they do? They grew their hair out, did a bunch of drugs, had a lot of sex that they called free love. So you can see sort of a trend here that when you have an oppressive authority that starts to exert power over people, it creates its own reaction. The oppressive authority creates its own reaction. So now fast forward to today. What is generally viewed as the oppressive authority on college campuses across America today? I think we all know that. And the great irony of this oppressive, repressive PC culture is that if Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious and the rest of the Sex Pistols were a band on this campus today, they would be writing songs about trigger warnings and safe spaces and rebelling against the repressive culture that exists on campus today. And I would go so far as to suggest that they would be members of Young Americans for Freedom. You don't, if you don't believe me, if you don't believe that Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten would be writing songs of rebellion against trigger warnings and safe spaces, consider this. Just last month, Johnny Rotten himself went on Good Morning Britain and said that he was a fan of Donald Trump. He said he considered Donald Trump, quote, a political sex pistol. I'm not joking. The Atlantic magazine, which is no bastion of right-wing thought, wrote an article in October of 2016 trying to explain the punk rock allure of Donald Trump. So, this is the grand irony. This is the grand irony of this repressive culture. That you are making Donald Trump punk rock. So congratulations, social justice warriors. You are the establishment. And the harder you dig in, and the more you suppress and exert authority over other people, the bigger the backlash you are going to create. Like Donald Trump being punk rock. You're going to create the cool counterculture on college campuses these days is going to be Republicans, unfortunately. No one wants that. Who wants Republicans to be cool? I certainly don't. And I don't want my punk rock ruined with Donald Trump. This is what's happening. The central suppressive authorities always get a reaction. And unfortunately, it's wrecking my music. So, outside of the fact that I don't want my music to be wrecked, I'm here to talk about free speech and make a moral case and a practical case for free speech. And I'm going to give you 4 main arguments that all funnel into one major thesis. Okay. Number 1, being offended is how we learn. Being offended is how we learn. Number 2, without free expression, you cannot subject ideas to the scientific method. Number 3, hate speech is minority's best friend. Number 4, I know that's going to be a tough one to swallow, trust me. Number 4, if not speech, then what? And so, I think we all want the same thing. We all want a peaceful, civil society where everyone's views are tolerated and anyone can be whoever they want to be. We all want the same things. Left, right, center, libertarian, or not. We all want that. So the question is, how do we get there? And generally you hear people suggest that the way that you get there is through legislation, hate speech laws, speech codes, and these kinds of things. And then you kind of force the culture to follow that. And I'm here with my main thesis is, first you have to move the needle of culture and have society evolve. That creates the political climate in which the legislation can be passed. So my argument is, first you create a climate of tolerance for all kinds of speech, even hateful, bigoted speech. Then you flesh out what ideas are good and what ideas are bad over time. Then society learns, having this public discussion, this public forum, then that as society evolves, then that creates the conditions of political will that can have that legislation that we want at the very end. So my argument is that culture is the horse that pulls the cart of legislation. Culture first, laws second. That's how it has to be. It's very hard to do it in the other direction. All right. Being offended is how we learn. Point number 1. Being offended is how we learn. If we can't be offended, then we can't criticize ideas. And if we can't criticize ideas, then we can't figure out what ideas are good and what ideas are bad. And we can't learn from one another. So first, someone suggests a new idea, then someone criticizes that new idea. Everyone's offended. The idea offends people, the criticism offends people, but then in that process, we learn. And after that learning process happens, society evolves. So this offensiveness of ideas is true for all ideas, even the ones that we now accept as obvious and true. Let me give you a couple of examples of ideas that used to be very offensive that now we just accept as true. The sun, not the earth, is the center of the solar system. That was an extremely offensive idea at one time in history. In fact, it could have gotten you killed if you had said that. And then here's some more. Interracial marriage is okay. How about this one? Women should get to vote. That seems like an offensive idea, right? Gay people should be able to adopt children. These are all ideas that are generally accepted now, but to some degree are still offensive to some people right now. So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to shut off a public dialogue and a public discourse concerning these civil rights because some people might be offended at the idea of a gay couple adopting a child? Should we have shut that down and not allowed society to evolve? Should we have shut that down because if somebody might have been offended by that debate? I suggest not. Knowledge starts as offendedness. It's just the truth of the matter, even for true ideas. So I think we learn from each other in a social way. And the best way that we can learn from each other in a social way is to not allow any ideas to be above criticism. No ideas can be above debate. You know what the institution that believes that some ideas are above criticism and some ideas are above debate, that don't allow you to have discussions and you can't be skeptical? That's called religion. Right? And this repressive, anti-speech, I don't want to hear fingers in the ears culture that is on campus right now is looking and acting and sounding like a religion. It's above reproach, we can't talk about it, And what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to, like all religions, just take it on faith? No. I suggest that the best way to learn and the best way to advance society and accept new ideas is to have the vigorous debate about all ideas, no matter how reprehensible or hateful they might be. The right to offend means the right to learn, and without offense, there is no progress. So, this leads me to the next point. A climate of free expression enables ideas to be subjected to the scientific method. Scientific method meaning trial and error, conjecture and refutation. These are important for the public discourse. And again, all ideas are on the table, all of them. This is how we pursue truth. One of the greatest insights into the philosophy of science is that the scientific enterprise is not about running experiments and doing research and doing science. One of the greatest insights in the philosophy of science is that science, the scientific enterprise, is not about running experiments, doing research, and doing science. Think about it. You could sit there and do experiments, do science in your own home and not talk to anybody. And at that level of science, it is virtually impossible to distinguish Einstein from a raving lunatic. If you have just two guys in the privacy of their own home, not talking to anyone, writing equations on a board, it is in principle indistinguishable between Einstein and a raving lunatic. It is only when that science gets brought out into the public discourse that we're finally able to distinguish who is Einstein and who is the raving lunatic. And I suggest that same method we apply to ideas. You can run around the world with whatever ideas you want inside of your own head and think whatever you want. But if you're in the business of pursuing truth and understanding what is real and what is false, then you must subject those ideas to public debate and criticism and public discourse. Otherwise, how do you know if you're Einstein or a raving lunatic, right? Another great advantage of this system is that it's public, that no one can control it. If it's in the public discourse, it's not controllable. It's another advantage to the system. And by the way, if you are so fearful of insane, lunatic, bigoted, crazy ideas from those insane people in like Westboro Baptist Church, and you won't allow them to subject their ideas to the public discourse, what does that say about your intellect? That you can't challenge that absurdity in a public forum. Don't give them that kind of respect. Expose them. Let those insane ideas come out and be up for debate. Put those ideas on the table and let everyone see how insane they are. Speaking of Westboro Baptist Church, I'm on to my third point, which is hate speech is a minority's best friend. First, I know this is great fodder for you guys, right? You're gonna write this down. Hate speech is a minority's best friend. First of all, laws against hate speech keep hate speech in the shadows, and the people that hold those bigoted beliefs in the shadows. I suggest that a better alternative is to let those people out themselves and come out and expose their beliefs. Don't keep them hidden in the shadows. I would like to know that the coffee shop owner down the street is a bigot, so I can never give him my money ever again. Let's let these people talk. Let's let these people hang themselves. That's first. Second, free speech and the issue of a climate that allows free expression is completely irrelevant when your opinion is the majority opinion. When your opinion is the majority opinion, free speech is just talking. No one cares. You're saying everything that everyone else thinks already. The people who most require free speech in a climate of free expression of all ideas are the maligned, underrepresented minority viewpoints. They desperately need a climate in which all ideas are out in the public. Minority views require that kind of free expression and climate. They're the ones that need to be protected. And the way that you protect those minority views is by allowing this climate of free expression. Let me give you an example. I'll just say this, that when you have that sort of climate, that allows the minority viewpoints to be able to fight back and refute and denounce the ignorant, bigoted positions that they encounter. That climate allows them to fight back. Chilling speech doesn't allow them to fight back and have that debate to push society forward. Okay, consider this. You're a gay man born in the 1920s, right? You could be, let's talk about Frank Kameny. The climate that you grow up in is extremely hostile to you, beyond what anyone in this room can even imagine. Frank Kameny was fired from his job as an astronomer for the government in 1957. That wasn't very long ago. He was fired from his job. Gay people back then were, at the very least, called gross and disgusting and whatever other homophobic terms there are. But at the very most, people were scared to have them around their children. People were scared of homosexuals ruining society. It was destabilizing the family and destabilizing society. This was normal, majoritarian rhetoric. So if you were pro-gay rights back then, not only could you could never out yourself and voice that opinion and have that debate, but you would be fired from your job, like Frank Kameny in 1957. It's not very long ago. This is the climate that existed not very long ago. So, you think to yourself, wouldn't we want hate speech laws to protect gay people in that climate? Wouldn't we want that? I don't think that's possible. Remember, culture is the horse that's pulling the cart of laws. So, in that climate, where you could be fired from a government job for being gay and never get your job back, despite fighting to get your job back, and fighting that was wrong in court and losing every time, do you really think a politician had any sort of guts or any political will to get up to pass a law that would protect gay people? And I would suggest, in that climate, hate speech laws would be used against people like Frank Kameny. Hate speech laws would be used to shut him up because he's a threat to children. That's what they said. So Frank and everybody else like him needed the public forum. They needed the climate of free expression of all ideas. No matter how crazy or unvalued they are at that time, he needed that public forum to debate the ignorance that he was encountering in every day of his life. The climate of free expression helps people like Frank. And remember, hate speech laws carry the force of government. They carry the force of violence. It's a weapon that it could be used against minority opinions. It was a weapon that could have been used against Frank Kameny. So, let me suggest that if there's going to be times in your life when you're not going to be in the majority. There's going to be times in your life where you're going to hold a minority view and lots of people will disagree with you. And if we have this weapon of the government restricting speech, it's going to be used against you if you hold minority viewpoints. It would have been used against gay people back in the 50s and 60s. Easily, to save the children, just like everything else. Oh, to save the children. So if your ideas start losing ground, watch out. All right, final point. If not speech, then what? If we don't have this climate of open dialogue in public discourse, then what? How do we determine what is true and what is false? How do we determine what ideas are good and what ideas are bad? Is it going to be threats that determine what's good and what's bad? Is it going to be violence that determines what's true and what's false? If we don't allow speech, then what do you suggest? How do we determine what's true and what's false? Let's kill each other's hypotheses, not each other. Let's shoot each other down in public discourse. That's where the real juice happens. That's where the magic happens, if you will. So, I'm going to wrap up here and suggest a couple things. Being offended is a process in how we learn things. Every single truism that we all know right now, oh, the sun is at the center of the solar system, these were all offensive ideas at one point or another. And as soon as you shut down the debate, when somebody gets offended, you shut down learning, you shut down knowledge, and you shut down the pursuit of truth. Number 2, don't live in a vacuum. Subject your ideas to the scientific method. It's the only way you know whether what you think in your head is true or false, righteous or not. Figure out whether you're the Einstein or the raving lunatic drawing equations on the board. Number 3, hate speech is a minority's best friend. When you're in the minority viewpoint, you must be able to fight back against the bigotry that you're encountering. You must have that public forum, that public discussion. You cannot be silenced by whatever means that may silence you, whether government speech laws or a crowd around you. People like Frank Kameny would have been destroyed by hate speech laws because his speech would have been viewed as hateful and a threat to children. And 4, if not speech, then what? How do we determine what's right? And there's very few alternatives. There's threats, there's violence. Might doesn't make right, and in this case, might doesn't make truth. Truth needs to be whittled out of public debate and public discourse. So, why are campuses, which are historically seen as this great fostering of new ideas and exploration and things like that, why is this environment the one that is the most repressive on speech? I don't know. I think we should probably reverse course and have everybody just understand that this is your time to learn. I tried on all sorts of crazy ideas at George Mason University, and a lot of it was weird. It felt bizarre to think some of the things that I was thinking in some of my classes, but I learned a lot of it. And every time I changed my position, it hurt a little bit. It was uncomfortable and offensive that I once held the wrong position. And I was offended that I could have ever been wrong, but in the end, I'm happy that I was offended by learning new things. And I was offended on gaining some new modicum of truth. And that's what college is about, isn't it? Explore a little bit. Try on some wacky ideas. You may like it. Look, this guy's a Trump shirt on. I mean, he tried on a wacky idea. I'm not a Trump supporter, by the way. All right. Anyway, I'm going to give you a couple resources because I think this is the best moral case for free speech I've heard is Jonathan Rauch's book, Kindly Inquisitors. Another resource would be FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. That's a good organization. I would check out Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. He talks about some of the consequences of suppressing speech on campus. And there's a guy named Gad Saad who does a lot of really interesting talks on free speech. G-A-A-D-S-A-A-D. So my man's smiling over here. You know Gad, right? He's great. He's on the Rogan program if you watch Joe Rogan. So, with that being said, I would love to hear your wonderful questions.